Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Cold Coffee ELT podcast. My name is Chris Reese, and I'm an EFL teacher, academic manager, materials writer, and teacher trainer who works on the CELTA and Delta Module 1 courses. And I'm also one half of Cold Coffee ELT. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Nataliia Naradovska-Reese, a CELTA and CELT-P qualified English teacher with extensive experience in teaching one-to-one students, including young learners, business English, general English, and exam preparation, as well as being a teacher trainer in her own right, who helps teachers learn how to prepare their students for exams. So Natalie, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
So Natalie, just for us to get started, tell us a little bit about your background teaching one-to-one students.
Well, I started a long time ago, about 13 years ago, I think. It actually happened in a very simple, I think, way, as a lot of us started thinking the same way. I first took a couple of one-to-one students who just wanted to, improve their marks at school a little bit. And it just started from there. Next year, I took more students, and then that's how I grew into a basically one-to-one teacher. So overall, I've been teaching for about 13 years. Yeah. Mostly, I've been working with one-to-one students, although I have also quite a lot of experience teaching groups. And I've also taught business English, as you said, and I've done some preparation for exams.
So would this be the one-to-one students?
Yeah. Both, with one-to-one students and groups. I have quite an extensive experience in preparing for the NO exam, which is the Ukrainian state exam, and Cambridge exams as well. For example, B2, B1, B2, and also quite a bit for in preparing for IELTS.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I guess one question would be, well, you've mentioned a little bit why some of the students came to you in terms of teaching one-to-ones, but why did you start teaching one-to-ones? What about teaching one-to-one classes was appealing to you or interested you?
Well, first of all, it was, of course, convenient for me because I could choose the hours. I could negotiate that with my students. We could agree on the best time for both of us. And for example, when you work for a school, you teach groups, you usually have fixed timetables. So it gets a little bit, difficult to, for example, work and study at the same time. That it was one of the reasons why I first started teaching one-to-ones. And then it just grew into basically a school. I came to the point when I had too many students and it was too difficult for me to visit them. So I decided to open my own place. And that was another step in my career when I also started offering group lessons. And that was quite interesting because I also had to learn how to manage basically little school, taking care of the premises and everything. So that was another experience which I'm actually very thankful for, and it taught me a lot as well. Yeah.
Okay. So then how does a one-to-one lesson differ from learning in groups?
Well, first of all the attention of the teacher is basically at a student. So you are concentrated on only one student in the lesson, and that is one of the advantages, in my opinion, that you can actually give much better feedback to your student and concentrate on students' actual needs, not taking into account the whole group, but a specific student, and also the result can be achieved much quicker in this case.
Okay, so you seem to have a pretty positive view of one-to-one classes. Any other benefits of one-to-one teaching that you can think
Um, of course, it's convenience for students because, for example, sometimes students are, introverts and they are too shy, for example, to go and work with other students, which we can argue here because usually talking to other people, you also learn a lot from other students, not only from the teacher
of?
when you work in a group. However, sometimes it just works better for some students. Then also another thing is the again convenience in timetable because for example, I remember I had students at some point who would come at 7 o'clock in the morning before school because it was the only time when they were available to have lessons, and I agreed to do that. So for them, it was the only possible way to study English. And for example, if you think about attending a group, yeah, this basically becomes impossible.
Especially if you have like an irregular timetable, or if
Yeah.
you work nights or something
Yeah,
like this.
yeah. So that is also another reason. Well, also, as I've already mentioned, if a student needs something very specific, like, for example, I don't know, one might start a career in a hotel, for example, yeah. So they will need a very specific kind of language for that. And this is quite difficult to achieve in a group. I mean, it's very difficult to imagine, for example, finding a school and a group who would be willing to work only on this, for example. So this is another reason why some people choose one-to-one lessons, of course.
Yeah, and that could even extend to things like exam preparation, because I know, for example, in lots of centers, when it comes to IELTS, like they tend to lump all of the IELTS people into one class together. So you might have someone who's looking for an IELTS 5.5 in the same class as someone who's looking for an IELTS 7.5.
Yes.
And they are going to have very different needs.
True. So, and also, for example, you might have sometimes students who don't need help in terms of, I don't know, speaking part, but they really need some advice and assistance in writing. So it happened a couple of times that some students came to me and asked me just to teach them how to write, for example, the writing part for ZNO. The same way, for example, with Cambridge exams. Or just the opposite. Some students might not be very comfortable, for example, with speaking, and they would ask you to work specifically only on speaking, which is, again, a very specific request, and in a group it would be, again, quite difficult to...
Yeah, and even I've had requests before for people just to have, for example, phonology. So I just want to focus on my pronunciations. Well, okay, you're probably not going to find a pronunciation group open at a lot of schools.
It's a it's a very specific thing, and of course, I'm sure that if you look for it very carefully, you might find something. But again, different things with allocation, with if it's online, and if it's, for example, a tutor or a teacher is located in a different country, it's going to be online. So things like how you pay for the classes, the timetable, because the time difference might be also challenging. So all of these things might be might become a problem here.
Okay. So then we've talked lots about the potential benefits of one-to-one lessons. Are there any potential drawbacks if we compare them with, for example, usual lesson studying in a small group, for example?
Of course. For example, first of all, if a teacher works with the same student for quite a long time, first of all, the student gets used to a teacher. And to teacher's accent, to the way the teacher, leads the lesson and everything. So if such student goes into a different environment, it might be stressful for them at first. Also, because you work a lot with each other, it just happens naturally that you get to know each other very, very well. And because of that, normally when you discuss something, sometimes it might get just, you might run out of things to talk about each other because you've been together for so long. You basically know almost everything about each other. So it also becomes a little bit challenging how to turn this discussion questions and discussion points into something interesting and meaningful for both of you.
That's a really good point too, because like even if we think about most course books, they're written for
groups.
Yeah, mostly, teachers. Yeah, exactly. So the fact that what's in the course book might be designed to be done collaboratively or to be done with the help of other people, and in a one-to-one lesson that may not happen. And before we started, actually, we were just talking about this about like students who can get a bit too reliant on the teacher's help.
As well, yeah, because for example, you always have to be your student's partner. There is just no other way. And because of that, your student might really rely on you in terms of language help. Yeah. If they are not sure how to say something, for example, when you have a role play, yeah, they might forget about the whole situation you are in, so to say, and turn to you and say, how do I say this? Or what is this in English? And it was just, I told you, yeah, I had such situation just a couple of days ago when with one of my students, elementary students, we had to role play a phone call to the hotel where she needed to book a room and agree on details. And we were talking with her, and then she just forgot how to say something, and she was like, okay, Natalie, how do I say that? And I was like, sorry, I don't understand you, because she asked me, of course, in Ukrainian. And I was like, sorry, I don't understand you. I understand you. Could you repeat that, please? So I basically forced her to solve the problem with those resources that she had. And this is one of those things that like you need to push your students to go out of the comfort zone, because otherwise they just get too reliable on you.
Yeah, and you did eventually help her.
Of course, yeah. In then when we finished, in the feedback, I basically took what she said, yeah, and we discussed how we could do that differently, how we could say it in a different way. We upgraded her language, and then I forced her I pushed her to do the same again, which also creates this beautiful loop, because you do it once, the student gets feedback, you do it again, you upgrade it, and this way, by the end of the lesson, the student can actually feel the real result.
It's very motivating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really interesting that you mentioned like this idea of like teachers kind of almost dominating or being too helpful, because there was an interesting bit of research that was done on the way that learners of English interact with others. Because what they were trying to figure out was if they learn each other's mistakes, but they found some other interesting things along the way. What they found was that actually them learning each other's mistakes was relatively rare, but that if you have two learners who are at approximately the same level, they speak approximately the same amount.
Right.
But if you have two learners who are at wildly different levels, or in this case, the teacher who is like highly proficient and the student, that the students speak far, far, far less, because they do rely on the other person to drive the conversation.
True, absolutely. And I also wanted to mention that sometimes it just happens, teachers, because they are only with one student in the classroom, they sometimes say more than they should say, unfortunately. And then, for example, because I've talked about this with some of my colleagues, they were complaining about the fact that students don't speak as much as they would like them to. And then it just appeared that, for example, at the beginning of the lesson, when you say, so how are you? How was your weekend? Was it good? And the student says, yes. So you should have stopped when you asked, so how was your weekend? What did you do? Not asking like, was it good?
Right.
Yes. Because like, well, you've got the answer you asked for, right?
Yeah, I guess that might be, we could even add that to the challenges, just that there's nothing in a one-to-one lesson which kind of limits your teacher talk. Because like, for example, if I think about where I teach, where I've got a class of, 16 kids, if I talk for ages, I'm just going to lose them. They're going to be, rebelling and murdering each other in about 10 seconds. Absolutely. And so I've got kind of this cap on how much I can speak, but in a one-to-one lesson, you don't see this limitation as much.
True.
So then we talked about several potential drawbacks or problems. How do you try to deal with these issues while you're teaching?
You mean
some of the challenges that we've talked about, or some of the issues? How do you try to deal with these, or preempt them maybe in your own teaching?
For example, if we take that problem that I was talking about, when you get to know each other so well that it just becomes kind of boring to talk to each other. I once showed that in a webinar I was given on teaching one-to-ones. It's a very simple thing that everyone can do. For example, take a couple of photos of different people and just a couple of sentences with some general information about these people, let's say, and ask your student to choose a role. Look at these photos, choose who you want to be today, and imagine that you are this person. I'm gonna also do the same. So let's kind of turn it into a little bit different game. Now let's imagine that we live our lives as different people, and now let's try to build our conversation or build our discussion based on this, which actually might sometimes lead to very funny discussions. And at first students might get a little bit hesitant to do that, but if you as a teacher, you push it a little bit and you start giving some, I don't know, funny facts about you, it might also help your student to open up a little bit and also like provoke good discussions. That's one thing that you can do. Also, as I said, sometimes you need to, shut up and listen and really push your student. Don't help them immediately, because, and this is a very natural thing. Sometimes when you listen to your student, they can say something, and a teacher can finish their sentence. It sometimes feels that a teacher just reads my mind. Don't. Let them finish that sentence for themselves. Or then again in the feedback, talk about like how this would have been said in a different way.
And that's something as well that I think lots of teachers get, this smiling student, like happy student, that, oh, my teacher helped me. But it's like, okay, well, yeah, maybe you helped them today, but maybe this is actually doing them a disadvantage in the long run.
Absolutely. And this comes to the point when, for example, right now, lots of us faced with this challenge when we went to, some of us went to live abroad. We had to solve our everyday problems with the language that we had. And very often, because you relied on teacher so much in the lessons, now you go to a cafe, for example, and you want to order a cup of coffee, and there is no one to help you. So you will either get a cup of coffee, or you will wait for help, and will be left without your cup of coffee.
Right. Okay. So then, are there any other challenges that you think a teacher might encounter in the process of, let's say, planning and preparing lessons, teaching lessons, or any other things that you could think of? Challenges in teaching that might be specific to one-to-one classes?
Well, first of all, when you plan a lesson, as we've mentioned with you, I want to say all of the course books are designed for group lessons, and because of that, you need to be very careful when, for example, thinking about let's say freer practice, because there will be no one to do that with your student. You will have to do it together. And some things, like, for example, at the end of the lesson, there are activities like student A, go to page this, student B, go to this page, and let's role play. So you need to really think carefully if you will be able to do that with your student, or maybe this activity needs to be changed because two of you just won't be enough in this activity. Also, I really don't like when, for example, you just take a task from the course book and it says discuss with your partner. And when the student reads the task, it says discuss with your partner. And sometimes if you get a new student, and if they're not used to working with you, they might get confused, like, well, work with your partner? What? I don't have a partner. Who's going to be my partner?
The idea of kind of unstructured speaking might be something that could be very new to them.
So also thinking very carefully about how you're going to give these instructions and how you're going to word your instructions and like tasks, things like that. Another thing also to bear in mind is that because there are only two of you, all the attention is on the student. So a student works, well, arguably much more in a one-to-one lesson than in a group level. Arguably,
they're under the microscope for sure.
And because of that, you need to really balance this, work when they speak, write, how much you, do the actual control practice exercises, and how much you discuss something, because otherwise it might just feel too tiring for a student. If you just give control practice for practicing tenses for the whole lesson, even, for example, in a exam preparation class, it's, in my opinion, a very bad idea, because as much as they need a lot of practice in practicing tenses, it might be just too much. So you need to balance this.
And it's still probably, on the exam they're taking, if they're taking most language exams, there's going to be a component on every skill. So it's important that they fill in gaps, but how much can you really learn a language by filling in gaps? And what do you need to do to go beyond that?
Also, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Also, sometimes it just happens that students come to a class from work, from school, and they come to a class and they say, I'm so tired. Can we just talk today? And it's like, well, we can, of course.
Some students may have this expectation of one-to-one tutoring period that, like, they won't use a course book, and that they
or just for example, just let's talk in English, let's speak
actually
the whole lesson, and there is nothing wrong with that. But still, the teacher needs to bear in mind that just speaking is probably not the best way. So
Right.
still you need to be ready to somehow squeeze in some little learning things into
Right.
this speaking, so
Right.
to say.
So, and actually, this is very interesting opinion that I read someone say the other days. They said that course books actually should not be used with one-to-one students.
Interesting.
What's your take on that?
I don't see anything bad in using course books
Mm-hmm.
in one-to-one lessons because in any case, is it a one-to-one lesson or is it a group lesson? You still need some materials
Mm-hmm.
to work with. Of course, probably sticking to one course book will not be the best idea.
Like blindly following the
Yes.
course book, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
And
bad for even for groups as well.
of course, and you will need to change some things or a lot of things probably in the course book, or I don't know, mixing some course books would be fine, but there still should be some basis.
Like, so what you're saying basically is that the students are still going to need some structure to the lesson. Like, we don't just throw out pedagogy.
Okay, for example, you design your own context for the lesson, and this is absolutely fine. You teach some language without a course book, but then it just happens that sometimes you can create controlled practice from students' language that they give you, yeah. But sometimes it's just, well, almost impossible to do, and for that you will need still to turn to course books or grammar books.
So the course book basically as a tool, but the course book isn't the lesson.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to the point that we mentioned about like learners having different preferences, or some of them maybe feeling a bit pressured, like they're under the microscope. How have you dealt with this? How do you usually deal with this?
I try to really balance how much you do, let's say, I don't want to call this exercises, but like how much you actually do control practice exercises and how much you
like stirring and settling, basically.
Yeah, let's call it that way. And also sometimes it's a very good idea to probably get distracted from the exercise. Like actually, if the student tells you something, go for a minute and talk about your own experience. But be very careful here because you might get carried away very quickly and like forget about what you have been doing before that.
Kind of respect them as individuals, but then get back to the lesson itself. Yeah. And one thing that I've found helpful as well is just asking them sometimes, saying, okay, here's this exercise. Do you want to do it on your own or do you want to do it together?
Yeah, that's also a very good idea. And sometimes actually students very surprisingly choose to work on their own.
Yes.
As weird as it might look, because they actually need some time to think without a teacher always like being a helicopter.
Yeah, and sometimes they if they think they've done it, they think they've got it pretty well, they might say, yeah, let's just do it together. Yeah. Then bip, 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 you're done really quick. But either way, kind of balls in their court, and they it's a small decision for them to make.
It's also a very good saying that you have this choice in a one-to-one lesson, because in a group lesson, it's still very preferable that you give them some time before you go into checking the answers.
Yeah, and while that can be arranged, then you get into like management, differentiation, and tiering, and it's such a much more complicated thing to do in a group lesson. Agreed. Okay. So then let's imagine then I'm a teacher who has decided that I want to work primarily with one-to-one students. I want to pursue being an individual tutor. Where do I find students?
It's a very good question, to be honest. Well, I don't know, luckily or unfortunately, but I've never looked for students myself. I've never advertised myself as a teacher. It just happens that students found me somehow. It was recommendations. They followed me somewhere on Facebook or Instagram, and they saw what I was posting about teaching, learning English, and they got interested and got in touch with me because they wanted to have lessons with me. However, I think that it's a very good idea, especially if you just are going to start this. To register on some platforms for private teachers, like for example, Preply or whatever they call it.
I found out recently, by the way, it's Preply.
Preply, yeah.
Yeah.
Have your profile, tell about yourself. It's a very good idea to also make a short video presentation where you talk about yourself, about your experience, how you probably can structure your lessons, what you're going to do during the lessons. Also, there are lots of such similar platforms, even in Ukraine, for tutors and one-to-one teachers. Another thing is to have your own blog where you would give some tips and, for example, advice on how to learn English, some probably small grammar lessons or little bits of vocabulary every day. And that way, like, people who want to learn English will follow you and probably in the future become your students. But as I've said,
and then I think the only thing I would really add to that as well is considering specializing in something, because I know, like, when I get one-to-one requests, like 99% of the time, if I get a one-to-one request for English, it's C2 preparation, C2 exams of some sort, just because, like, that's something which I've in the past specialized in. And that's something that I kind of got I wouldn't say got a reputation for being able to do, but that was something that I did very frequently. So the fact that I also had something unique, not unique, but something which is less common that I could do, where there was kind of a niche and a demand, also kind of helped, because again, I never had to search these people out, but I would always get, you know, I guess every half a year I get 5 or 6 requests for C1 or C2 exam preparation.
True. Yeah, and that's also a very good idea to talk about that in your blog or in your video presentation.
Like, show people that you have this expertise.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because this might be something that unique thing that only you can do, and that many professionals, teachers might do, which might be very good for you.
Even kind of associating your personal brand with this, like, because I know lots of people do this with IELTS, lots of people do this with business English and presentation skills, and okay. So I guess the last one, this is something we've also talked about at length in the past, is let's say I'm a one-to-one teacher. Now, just to introduce the problem, very often if I work for a school, for example, especially if it's a really good school, my school is going to invest a lot in my professional development. I might get observations from an experienced teacher, or they might pay for me to go do courses, or even most professional development courses that exist are aimed towards people who teach in traditional classrooms, who teach in groups. So if I'm a one-to-one teacher, what can I do to develop professionally, or am I just stuck?
Well, to be honest, thank you very much for that question, because actually the idea of this podcast comes from my own experience. At some point in my career, I unfortunately was stuck because I felt alone and I had no one to talk to. I had some problems in my everyday teaching, which I would love to have and to hear someone's advice on, but because I was a one-to-one teacher, I had no one to talk to. And that's how I started looking for things like different workshops, webinars. I remember I attended first seminar, which was, I don't know, I was so excited about that. And then first conference, which was also quite a big event for me. So I love that. So overall, I would recommend looking for such things like, well, right now there are lots of different webinars that are available for everyone, and a lot of them are free. So looking into something like that. Also, there are lots of courses that are run online as well. Also, if you want to develop, well, you need to be ready, of course, for that, because it will take some probably preparation and lots of work and time, but things like the CELTA course.
So you would even recommend something like the CELTA, even if you're a one-to-one teacher?
Absolutely. I was a one-to-one teacher, mostly, yeah. And when I did my CELTA course, it was, I don't want to say an eye-opener, no, but it was a huge push for me at that time. Also, unfortunately, well, right now we don't have courses like CELT-P and CELT-S anymore, but I know that the course
CYLT.
CYLT, yes, thank you, still exists. So if you teach, for example, small kids, that might be also quite useful for you.
Also the Trinity, what's it called? TILEC.
Yeah.
A bit harder to find now after COVID, because lots of centers have stopped running it, but I want to say that there's a center in Geneva that still does it. It might be Bell, actually.
But again, yeah, look for some courses like that. And also bear in mind that, for example, courses like, for example, Cambridge courses, CELTA course will give you a qualification, well-respected qualification all over the world. And of course, you will get certificate, which will also allow you to work not only in Ukraine, but abroad as well.
And it's also very standardized, which I think is another big benefit, that
Absolutely.
like kind of know what you're getting.
Yeah. Also, small courses that some centers offer might also be worth looking into. And another thing would be probably not to be afraid and to invite somebody to observe you. Why not? Because as probably intimidating as it sounds for especially, I don't want to say anything bad here, but if you are a one-to-one teacher, you are used to always be alone, to to do things your way.
Yeah, if I can interject here, I remember I was doing a job interview the other day, and it was probably about 2 months ago, and I remember I asked the woman, so when was the last time you were observed teaching? And her response, she laughed and she's like, no, I've never been insulted like that before.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, cool. Like, I've personally had probably over 100 observed teaching hours throughout my career, like with senior teachers or observers kind of sitting and watching. Yeah. So it's kind of not something to be scared of. Who would you recommend then that I ask to observe me?
Well, I would look for somebody with a lot of experience in teaching, because if, for example, a person has good qualifications, but has very little experience in actually teaching, that might be probably not the best person to turn to.
Like they might know the theory, but they don't know how to translate that into the classroom.
Unfortunately, yeah. Also, in general, I would look for someone who is a well-respected teacher trainer. And if you happen to know, for example, even a CELTA tutor who you probably follow again on somewhere on Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah, we're not hard to find.
Yeah, of course. Even turn to such people, and if they don't offer such services, openly. It never hurts to get in touch, to write a message and to ask for such thing. Even, of course, you will have to be prepared that it won't be for free, and it will probably cost a bit. But in my opinion, if you do that, you will get very valuable feedback and meaningful feedback, something that will really help you to improve. And if you are, because I've talked about this a lot of times when doing any courses, like for example the CELTA course, you have to be open-minded and you have to be ready to listen. If your tutor or somebody says that this needs to be taken into account, and here you might consider doing this in a different way, don't say no immediately and don't start advocating yourself.
Just it's not a personal attack. It's the person's trying to help you.
So give it a go. Who knows, maybe actually you will find that this works for you very well, and you will see the actual benefit of this in the future.
And just to clarify, I don't think either of us are saying like the only people who you can talk to about this are like CELTA tutors or things like that. But what the point that you're making is that look for someone who is well respected, who is experienced, who also has the knowledge to do what or to help you actually move forward in a particular direction. CELTA tutors are one example of a person who could do this, but there's lots of people. If you look, just the thing to be careful with is that when you look, for example, on Instagram right now, it's very popular that people call themselves kind of teacher trainers. And many of these people are brilliant, amazing professionals who could absolutely give you the kind of feedback and something like that, which would be really, really developmental and helpful. And there's loads of people like this. There are some people who maybe have tried to push themselves a bit too far too quickly in their career and who may not be able to give you as much help as you might want. So just looking at the person as a whole and looking for someone who's got the experience, who's got the qualifications, and who can really kind of help you move forward in the area that you want to move forward in, whether it's teaching kids or teenagers or business English or whatever, kind of finding someone who's got that expertise as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Overall, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's basically our last question. So, Natalie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
So we hope that this podcast was helpful for everyone and that you got something from it. As always, feel free to give us a like, follow us on Instagram and TikTok and here on YouTube. And well, we hope to see you all very soon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.